Each and every Monday, I go over the biggest risers and fallers in average draft position, aka ADP, in best ball markets. I'll discuss whether I'm buying or selling these players at their new prices and why. The idea is to get you up to speed very quickly on what's happening out there in drafts and how to adjust. It's going to start with Jalen Tolbert, Cowboys wide receiver, up 10.8 spots on DraftKings to 202 overall. I know I've talked about Jalen Tolbert on here before. I have been operating under the assumption all offseason that Jalen Tolbert will be the Cowboys wide receiver 3 this season. There's certainly been talk of competition in the form of Jalen Brooks or Kevontae Turpin. My take is Dallas really wants Jalen Tolbert to win this job, and the camp reports have suggested that he's done just that he's running away with the job. Tons of highlights, tons of praise from beat reporters and from coaches on Jalen Tolbert. So yeah, I feel pretty confident that Jalen Tolbert will at least open the season as the number 3 wide receiver for one of the NFL's best and most voluminous pass games on a Cowboys team with basically 0 pure target earners behind CeeDee Lamb. So yeah, at 202 overall on Tolbert, just a no-brainer anytime I need some upside late at wide receiver. Correlated with Dak or even uncorrelated, I take Tolbert in either situation. Of course, there's certainly ways Jalen Tolbert goes bad. At the wide receiver position, you actually need to be good to put up fantasy points. And we have a decent amount of data to suggest that Tolbert is not that good. He's appeared in 25 games for the Cowboys since being drafted in 2022, has caught a total of 24 balls. But again, at pick 202, the opportunity cost is so low. Easy pick for me there on Jalen Tolbert. Second riser I wanted to mention is Tyler Algier. He is up 7 spots on DK to 154 overall, also up 8 spots on Underdog this week. This one is frustrating for me a little bit. The reason Algier is up so much on both sites is because of a quote from Zach Robinson, new Falcons offensive coordinator. A quote that was, in my opinion, just taken wildly out of context and wildly overblown. Zach Robinson was asked directly by a reporter about Tyler Algier. And he said the usual coach speak nonsense when he's asked about a player. Tyler's a great player. He's going to have a big role. And certainly at points in the season, we're going to be leaning on him. People immediately took that Zach Robinson quote to mean that there's going to be some big timeshare. Tyler Algier is going to eat into Bijan a ton like he did last season. If Zach Robinson had been asked about Bijan, and he has been this offseason asked about Bijan, he says, our plan is to give the ball to Bijan as much as we can and in as many situations as we can. So yeah, I've actually taken a ton of Tyler Algier this summer. We know he's a legit good NFL running back. He's in a good scheme / offensive environment. He's one injury away from projecting as a top 12 running back for us weekly. But all that Algier exposure is in the 160s and 170s. It's a bit tougher at 150 when I don't think he's going to get more than 6 to 8 touches per game, barring a Bijan injury. I'll still take him in the 150s in the builds where I need to add running back depth. But yeah, it's definitely getting thinner at 150. Anyway, I thought this was Algier quote was just one good example of understanding coach speak and training camp reports this time of year. It's not something a bot or an algorithm can do. The edge is in really listening to the quotes, reading through everything, taking a bunch of people's opinions, having a historical baseline for this stuff. The edge is in understanding nuance. And so I think the market really overreacted to this quote. On the other hand, examples of things during training camp that I think actually matters, Christian Watson playing well ahead of Dontavian Wicks in the scrimmage on family night. Colby Parkinson running ahead of Davis Allen in training camp. That's the stuff I think matters. And obviously, if you've been following me on Twitter, listening to the pods, I think you understand that. Third riser to talk about is J.K. Dobbins. Old friend J.K. Dobbins up 11 spots in 1 week to 156 overall. Man, so Dobbins is moving up on positive camp reports, him being healthy and working off and on, but working from day one at camp. Not much hype on Kimani Vidal. Gus Edwards coming off of some type of procedure Jim Harbaugh wouldn't specify. Now, I want to be clear here. Gus Edwards was back practicing and reportedly looked very good on Saturday. J.K. Dobbins has missed at least a couple practices since camp started. We're not sure exactly why. I'm just guessing maintenance. I think the question everyone needs to ask themselves on J.K. Dobbins is simply, Is he the outlier? Is he the guy who will come back from a horrific knee injury in 2021, multiple surgeries, dragging his leg around in 2022, blowing out his Achilles in week 1 of 2023, barely playing NFL football for 3 years? Is he the outlier who can not only come back from that and play, but be effective and stay healthy? My bet has been no, but I'd be lying if I said these camp reports and videos of Dobbins don't make me a little scared. And it's really only because of price. You know, I also have very little Jonathan Brooks in addition to J.K. Dobbins, but Brooks was going 90 or 95 overall for much of the summer. Dobbins was pretty free, in the 160 or 180 range, and he could certainly fist me there. But look, I'm not going to chase J.K. Dobbins up the board. The kind of injuries he's had, I'm fine just making a systemic bet against him. I probably should have taken some when he was going in the 180s. But now that the price is rising, it's just going to be really, really hard for him, I think, to be effective and sustain health. If he's the outlier, though, yeah, it's going to be painful for me. Dobbins is actually, just to make a note, is another one where I'm more likely to take him in home leagues. If Dobbins comes out the first couple weeks, takes control of the backfield ahead of Gus as the 1A, Chargers don't add any other running backs, Dobbins looks healthy, great. If not, if I'm in a home league, I just drop him for someone hot off the waiver wire. I can't do that in best ball, obviously. All right, fourth riser I had to add here was Justin Fields. Justin Fields up 11.2 spots to 198 overall on Underdog. Really interesting one here on Justin Fields. I thought Russell Wilson was a borderline lock to start week 1, and I still think Russell Wilson will. Russ has been out of camp for a while with some calf issue. It's minor. He's getting back into practice next week. But during that time, Justin Fields reportedly showed really, really well, to the point where even friend of the show, Adam Schefter, said that it's not a done deal. Justin Fields is indeed live to start week 1. Now, this normally wouldn't be that big a deal, except Fields is a very good fantasy football player. Was fantasy's quarterback 12 in points per game last season, tied with Patrick Mahomes. Fields had a 100-yard rush game. He had 2 different 4-touchdown passing games. But, and you guys aren't going to believe this, but the NFL didn't care about his fantasy numbers. Bears could only get a conditional 6th-round pick for Fields, and the Steelers didn't even pick up Fields' 5th-year option. And that's a problem, right? Like, the NFL, even the Steelers, don't seem to think too highly of Justin Fields. We know he struggles with holding the ball too long, with getting to his second and third reads, with just general quarterback play at the NFL level. But it's not like Russ Wilson is very good at this point in his career either. My bet here is still that Russ starts week 1, but both guys make starts this season. And with that as my bet, should I be using a roster spot in best ball on Fields where, again, much like Dobbins, I can't drop him? My gut is no, because taking zeros is just the worst thing you can do. I mean, out of all the data we have, it's so clear the way to add the most EV to your best ball playoff roster is to have an entire roster of active playing players. Fields is just interesting in such a unique case because if he does play in the fantasy playoffs, we know he'll project as a top 12 quarterback. He gets the Chiefs in week 17. He goes around pick 200. So I'm following the camp reports here super close. My lean is no on Fields right now, but the types of best ball teams I'd want to have him on are ones where I don't have much upside at quarterback already on my roster, but I already have 2 quarterbacks. So if I got stuck with something like, I don't know, Baker Stafford or, Cousins, Bo Nix or something, I would tack Fields, or at least consider tacking Fields onto a team like that. Let's get to this week's fallers. Just going to do 2 fallers here today. First one is DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins down 12.6 spots to 81 overall on Underdog, also down 11 spots on DraftKings to 85 overall. This is obviously injury related, a bit out of nowhere on the injury for Hopkins. He was practicing last Wednesday, had like a sleeve type thing on his knee. And then Thursday, Paul Kuharsky, longtime Titans reporter, says Hopkins is going to be out 4 to 6 weeks with a knee issue. That's since been confirmed, but still no exact details on the nature of the injury. Good news is that DeAndre Hopkins will not need surgery. Sounds like some kind of sprain or strain. The bad news is he's 32 years old. Difficult injury for us to swallow. We had Hopkins ranked over Calvin Ridley for the entire offseason, which was very different than the market who preferred Ridley. I mean, the underlying stats there were very clear. Hopkins is the better receiver. And it's not like Ridley is young either. He'll turn 30 years old in December. But anyway, yeah, I mean, this is one reason why I try to save all my high stakes drafts for as late as possible. I think the later we get, the more information we get, the better I am. I want all the depth chart info. I want all the camp info. I think it also gives me the best chance of having 18 or 20 healthy / active guys come the playoffs. And also, the later I draft, I think the softer the rooms get. The downside, of course, of waiting to do all your high stakes or your most important drafts is closing line value. I mean, I had 54% Marshawn Lloyd a while ago, like a month ago, but that was all when he was going 160, 170. Now I'm down to 30% and dropping. I just haven't been taking him when he's going in the 120s, 130s, 140s. So anyway, back to Titans wide receiver stuff. So it actually sounds like Hopkins has a legit chance to be ready for week 1. Going to be tight, but I wouldn't bet against it. Will he have lingering effects as a 32-year-old coming off what appears to be a serious-ish knee injury? Possibly. We've moved Hopkins down pretty significantly in the rankings. We're at 95 overall on both DK and Underdog right now. There was already some systemic risk here. Yes, I do think Tennessee is going to be extremely pass heavy and aggressive, but there's some chance Will Levis just is straight not it, just bad. So I want to be a bit cautious with Hopkins now, especially since I already had 15% or so at the time of the injury. Chasing Calvin Ridley up the board here is also something I really don't want to do. He's up to 57 overall now on both sites. Getting him at the worst price he's been at all year, just not ideal. What I have done in response to this Hopkins news is some Will Levis, Treylon Burks backdoors. It's so cheap for how I expect this offense to play. And Burks certainly has some theoretical talent profile. I think ideally Burks would be best in the slot, but Tyler Boyd's going to be there as the direct backup to Hopkins on the outside. There's still some meat on the bone, I think, for Treylon Burks. Our last one to get to here is a faller, Brian Thomas, Jaguars rookie wide receiver, down 2.6 spots to 93 overall on DraftKings. Couple things here. First, as more regular people begin to draft, we've seen the rookies slip some. I think a big leak that a lot of fantasy players have is overrating week 1 production, early season projectable volume. And because of that, people don't love rookies in general. And again, this is something I really want to keep in mind as we engage in peak drafting season. More wide receiver values and more rookie values are going to start slipping to us, I think. And Brian Thomas fits both of those. So I'm not surprised that he's dropping. Also on Brian Thomas, there's been some light camp reports. And I use the term reports very loosely that have not been great on Brian Thomas. Typical beat reporter stuff in August is all glowing. This guy made this unreal catch. The reports from Jaguars camp have been more like, we haven't seen much from Brian Thomas, hasn't gotten many chances downfield. He's probably the number 4 option behind Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Gabe Davis. I don't pay too much attention to that stuff at all. What I am interested in, though, is a dipping price on a player like Brian Thomas, who the NFL seemed to agree was the 4th best wide receiver prospect in a ridiculously strong wide receiver class. Entering a Jaguars pass game, which we're buying a bounce back for, with a quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, who we have as a good value and really easily stackable. So it's not like I love BTJ. I definitely prefer Rome Odunze to Brian Thomas. I definitely prefer Jackson Smith and Jigba. I probably prefer Jamison Williams. But now that price is starting to sink toward that Romeo Doubs, Curtis Samuel range on BTJ, I'll start getting some more of Brian Thomas for sure. That's going to do it for this week's Market Monday. Be sure you are subscribed to the show on iTunes or YouTube. It is free, and we have a ton coming up. Tomorrow, we'll be posting our annual show with Matt Harmon, discussing some of the most polarizing wide receivers in fantasy. Also, going to get to a rankings change / news show with Silva. We'll get to the Puka Nacua injury and the Jonathan Brooks stuff, expecting both their ADPs to fall over the next week. And then maybe the man versus machine everyone wants later on the podcast this week, Silva debating Leone on rankings. Oh, and the first full preseason DFS / props week starts this Thursday. Preseason DFS and props really is so fun. Check out the details on our product for that in the menu under the preseason tab. For producer Luke, for editor Jackson, For Jerry, the most beautiful beast in the world, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.